A millionaire brings his housemaid to a company party, and what she does that night leaves him completely shocked. Not because she was clumsy, but because she changed the way he saw the world and himself. Before we dive into the story, we've got a quick question for you. When do you usually enjoy stories like this? While driving, relaxing, or right before bed? Drop a comment and let us know more about you. Now, let's find out what really happened that night. Luke Donovan, 32, is the CEO of a tech empire growing at breakneck speed. With jet black hair always perfectly styled, a tailored suit that fits like armor, and eyes sharp enough to cut glass, he carries the air of someone the world doesn't mess with. Anyone meeting Luke for the first time can instantly feel the cold wall he's built between himself and the rest of humanity. But in his 5,000 square foot penthouse, there's one person bold enough to walk barefoot across the rare hardwood floors and whistle pop songs mid-cleaning: Ellie Carter. Ellie, 24, is a temp maid sent over by a service agency. She's nothing like anyone Luke has ever hired before. No timid glances, no robotic nods. Ellie works her own way, vacuuming while bluntly critiquing his ice-cold interior design or pretending to interview Luke like he's applying for the role of first real friend. He didn't really mind, as long as she did the job well and showed up on time. That is, until one Friday morning when Luke got a message from his assistant. Company anniversary party tomorrow night. You need to bring a date. PR image is important. Luke frowned. The last woman he dated had blocked his number 3 months ago because she said, "I can't catch feelings for a statue." Time was tight, and the thought of calling up any of his more polite connections just gave him a headache. He picked up his phone, ready to text his assistant to find someone to play the part. But then his eyes landed on Ellie. She was wobbling on a chair, trying to dust a chandelier, her hair a wild mess, and her feet streaked with a bit of white dust. "Something wrong, boss?" Ellie asked, still holding a cleaning rag. Luke stayed silent for a few seconds. He couldn't believe the thought had even crossed his mind. But then he heard himself say, "Are you free tomorrow night? I need you to come with me to a company party." Ellie nearly dropped the rag. She jumped off the chair like she'd been shocked, eyes wide. "You want me to clean up at the party? Or just stand there to make it look like you brought someone?" "Not to clean, as a guest. Temporarily," Luke replied, his voice flat as ever. Ellie paused to think. She'd never been to a corporate party before. Especially not the kind where everyone wore suits and judged each other like walking bank accounts. But the idea of shaking up her routine suddenly felt oddly exciting. She tilted her head, half smirking, half teasing. "So, am I getting paid by the hour, or does this gig come with a pretty face bonus?" Luke glanced at her. For a split second, he almost laughed, but his face stayed as cold and unreadable as ever. "Hourly rate's fine," he said. "Just don't cause a scene." Ellie raised her hand in a mock sailor salute. "Aye, aye, boss. I'll try to be a background prop, with flair." Luke didn't reply. He turned away, but a faint, unfamiliar discomfort stirred in his chest. He wasn't sure if it was the worry that she might cause trouble, or the strange realization that, for the first time in years, the silence around him felt a little less suffocating with someone like Ellie in it. The next day, Ellie stepped out of the dressing room in a soft red dress that gently hugged her slender frame. The fabric light, the cut simple, but somehow perfectly catching the warm glow of the lights on her milky skin. She'd borrowed a worn pair of heels from somewhere and swiped on a light pink lipstick she'd grabbed last minute from the corner store. Luke looked up, ready to deliver his usual cold remark, but the words caught in his throat. He hadn't expected her to look like that. Beautiful in a way that was unpolished, unyielding. It left him off balance, like catching sunlight in the dead of winter. She didn't look like the polished women he was used to. Ellie looked natural, defiant, and painfully real. "Is it okay?" Ellie asked, shrugging, totally unfazed. Luke pushed the car door open. "Get in. You can't possibly be worse than the hired models." Ellie grinned, eyes crinkling like she'd just received the highest form of praise. She climbed in without hesitation, casually waving goodbye to the tree in front of the house. The car sped off into the city night, leaving behind a strange feeling creeping into Luke Donovan's mind. The sense that tonight's party might not go the way he's used to. Ellie sat in Luke's sleek black sedan, fingers toying with the hem of her red dress, legs gently bouncing with nerves. She'd never imagined herself walking into a glamorous event alongside a cold-as-ice millionaire. Luke drove with his eyes fixed ahead, occasionally glancing at her in the rearview mirror, as if checking to see whether she was coming undone. "Stop fiddling with your hair," Luke said, voice flat as usual. "Sorry, I'm pretending to be a classy woman who knows how to act confident in unfamiliar territory," Ellie muttered, pouting as she clumsily tried to smooth her wild curls. Clearly not very convincing. Luke smirked, somewhere between amused and resigned. He told himself that as long as she didn't accidentally set something on fire, he'd call the night a win. When the car pulled up in front of the five-star hotel, Ellie stepped out and was instantly hit by the weight of dozens of judgmental stares from the elegantly dressed crowd lining the red carpet. Her red dress, modest in cut but flowing and soft, along with her glowing fair skin, made her stand out in a sea of sleek black and white formality. She hadn't meant to draw attention, but she had. Luke held out his hand to her, a simple, polite gesture, but when Ellie placed her hand in his, both of them froze for half a second. Her hand was warmer, smaller, and softer than he'd expected. He gave a quick, light squeeze, then let go just as fast, slipping back into his usual cold expression. As they stepped into the grand ballroom, they were hit with a blast of frigid air from the high-end AC and the blinding glare of crystal chandeliers overhead. Ellie walked beside Luke, face calm like she belonged there, even though her heart was pounding like a drum inside her chest. A cluster of guests near the entrance, champagne glasses in hand, whispered among themselves while casting not-so-subtle glances their way. One woman, blonde with perfect curls and a shimmering gown, smirked as she stepped forward. She raised an eyebrow, giving Ellie a slow once-over before turning to Luke. "Luke, who's this? A new friend?" Before Luke could answer, Ellie beamed with a smile so effortlessly bright it bordered on provocative. "I'm his all-purpose staff. I mop floors, clean up, and occasionally serve as background decor for boring parties like this." The air froze for a beat. Luke raised an eyebrow at her, while the blonde woman was momentarily speechless, forcing a strained smile before awkwardly drifting away. A few quiet chuckles bubbled up from a younger group nearby. "Not bad," Luke murmured, still not looking at her. "Don't worry, I won't embarrass you," Ellie whispered playfully, flashing a mischievous wink. They moved deeper into the ballroom, where a live jazz band played softly and the buffet tables gleamed with silver trays and elegant arrangements. Ellie's eyes wandered, distracted by all the sparkle, and she accidentally bumped into a wine tray, nearly tipping it over. Luke caught it just in time. "Careful," he said, a little stern. "Sorry," Ellie mumbled. "Forgot I'm not cleaning the living room right now." Luke took a deep breath, reminding himself to be patient. Part of him knew that if he'd brought one of the usual models tonight, everything would have gone smoothly, predictably, and completely forgettable. But looking at Ellie, in her simple red dress, with that unsure smile and those wide, curious eyes, he realized this party might actually turn out to be memorable in a different way. A few of Luke's close colleagues approached to say hello. One man, middle-aged with a round, ruddy face, gave Ellie a quick once-over before asking bluntly, "So, are you Luke's new assistant?" Ellie laughed and gave Luke a light tap on the arm. "Not exactly. I'm the surprise he didn't know he was bringing." The group around them burst into laughter. Luke frowned slightly, but deep in his eyes, a rare flicker of something warm appeared. Not everyone was so welcoming. A few older guests made their disapproval obvious, whispering, throwing glances at Ellie like she was a stain on an otherwise perfect evening. Ellie noticed every bit of it, but instead of shrinking back, she simply smiled, adjusted the strap of her red dress, and lifted her chin a little higher. Luke glanced over, and for the first time he realized Ellie Carter, with all her clumsy charm and wide-eyed bluntness, had something that even women in $10,000 dresses couldn't fake. A natural defiance, unapologetic and real. As they moved toward the center of the room, where the music picked up and the top executives gathered, Luke told himself, just a few more hours. A long evening, with a strange girl, and an even stranger feeling quietly creeping in. The ballroom buzzed louder by the minute. The smooth jazz had shifted into livelier rhythms, but Ellie still stood out, in the most unexpected way. While elegant women shimmered in sequins and curve-hugging designer gowns, Ellie remained quietly radiant in her simple red dress. No flashy jewelry, no calculated glamour, just her soft, fair skin and an easy smile that somehow drew more eyes than any sparkle ever could. She didn't try to blend in with tentative steps or guarded glances. Ellie walked straight ahead, her stride as natural as if she were strolling down the sidewalk near her apartment. When someone accidentally stepped in her way, she offered a warm smile and a light joke, or simply dipped her head in a polite nod, simple, honest. That alone caught people off guard and instantly sparked quiet whispers around the room. Who is she? She came to a party like that? Not a single piece of expensive jewelry? The questions drifted through the air, tangled between confusion and the overpowering scent of designer perfume. Some women shot Ellie side eyes, their tight-lipped smiles loaded with unspoken judgment. But a few of the men? Their eyes gleamed, curious, intrigued, maybe even a little impressed. Luke stood a short distance away, champagne glass in hand, his cold gaze sweeping over the scene. He caught every side glance, every whisper trailing behind Ellie. Part of him wanted to walk over and shield her from it all. Another part was curious, wanting to see what she would do. Ellie, of course, noticed everything. She wasn't stupid. The looks people gave her were like tiny needles pricking her skin. But instead of shrinking back, she let out a slow breath and casually walked over to the buffet like she owned the place. In front of the buffet table, where everyone else was trying to maintain their air of icy elegance, Ellie helped herself to a full plate, mini quiches, grilled shrimp, fruit salad, like she was rewarding herself after a long day of work. And when her champagne glass accidentally clinked against that of a nearby businessman, she smiled and quipped, "Cheers, stranger. That suit's sharper than the shrimp." The man laughed out loud, and the people around them turned to stare. A girl who wasn't dressed by the book, who didn't act like anyone else, yet somehow managed to ease the stiff, polished tension of the room with just one offhand joke. Of course, not everyone was amused. A group of older women, cocktail glasses in hand, began shaking their heads subtly. One of them muttered just loud enough for Ellie to hear. Must have been a breeze that blew her in. Ellie heard it, clearly. She turned, smiled politely, then slowly picked up a strawberry from her plate and took a calm bite. After a moment, she looked directly at the woman and winked. Sometimes a fresh breeze is exactly what a room needs to breathe. The words were light, effortless, but they landed with precision. The group fell silent, if only for a beat. From across the room, Luke heard it too. He narrowed his eyes slightly, the corner of his mouth twitching. Not everyone could hold their ground under that kind of scrutiny. Not here. But Ellie did. No posturing, no need to prove anything. It was that calm defiance that made her stand out more than any designer dress ever could. He wondered, when did he, a man who always chose his companions based on resumes and refinement, start finding a barefoot girl in an unbranded red dress this damn compelling? Ellie returned to his side, holding out a cocktail with a bright grin. "You should try this. Sweet, but not too much. Kind of like how I'm trying to behave tonight." Luke took the glass, and for a brief moment, something in his gaze softened. He knew, without a doubt, tonight wasn't going to go the way he'd planned. The atmosphere in the ballroom gradually shifted as the evening moved into its more serious phase. A VIP section, separated by sleek glass panels, hosted investors and major partners engaged in tense conversations with Luke's executive team. The air was tight, faces serious, wine glasses half-drained and forgotten. Luke checked his watch, then gave a subtle nod to an assistant, a signal that he'd be stepping into the nearby meeting room shortly. Ellie, still outside that bubble of tension, stood casually nibbling on a pastry, completely unaware of the undercurrent rising through the room like a silent tide. Inside the meeting room, the mood had turned heavy. A major partner from Asia, Mr. Tanaka, looked visibly displeased. A few numbers in the contract had raised doubts about transparency, and his icy expression was making Luke's senior executives sweat through their suits. Outside, Ellie had been casually scanning the room when she caught the anxious glance of a nearby assistant standing close to the glass wall. Instinctively, she walked over and asked quietly, "What's going on?" The assistant, flustered, whispered an explanation. If this negotiation fell through, a multi-million-dollar deal could disappear in a puff of smoke. Ellie frowned. She didn't know much about finance or business deals, but one thing she did understand was people. And from the way Mr. Tanaka looked through the glass, he didn't seem angry. He looked exhausted. Then it hit her. Something Luke had once muttered during one of their random conversations. No one makes good decisions when they're hungry or sleep-deprived. Acting on a completely impulsive instinct, Ellie gently pushed open the glass door and stepped inside, instantly drawing every pair of eyes in the room. Luke's expression tightened. "Ellie, get out." "Now," he said under his breath, his voice low and firm. But she didn't listen. Ellie walked straight to Mr. Tanaka, offered a warm smile, and bowed, perfectly in line with Japanese etiquette. Then, gently, she placed a small plate on the table in front of him, a smooth slice of cheesecake and a clear glass of water. The room froze. Ellie tilted her head, grinning playfully. "I'm no good at negotiations, sir, but I do know when someone needs a little sugar to keep fighting." Mr. Tanaka looked at her, a flicker of surprise flashing through his seasoned eyes. Then, suddenly he chuckled, a deep, warm sound that broke the tension like glass. "This young lady," Mr. Tanaka said in fluent English, "seems to understand men better than any of you." The room burst into laughter, the tension melting almost instantly. One of the quicker-witted executives seized the moment with a well-timed joke, then smoothly pivoted into explaining the numbers again, this time with a softer tone. Within minutes, the atmosphere shifted from suffocating to manageable. Mr. Tanaka took a sip of water, bit into the cheesecake, and gave a slow, approving nod. "Go on," he said. "I don't like wasting time, but now I'm ready to listen." Luke stood half-leaning against the edge of the table, arms crossed, watching Ellie, the clumsy girl in the simple red dress, who had just salvaged a multi-million-dollar negotiation with nothing but a slice of dessert and a genuine smile. He didn't know whether to be furious or laugh. But one thing was clear. Tonight, Ellie had proven she wasn't just some reluctant accessory he dragged along for show. As she quietly turned to leave the room, Luke stopped her with a look. "Do you even realize what you just did?" he asked, voice low. Ellie shrugged, eyes sparkling like she was holding in a joke. Ruined a professional negotiation with a dessert power play." Luke laughed, really laughed this time, a low, rough sound that slipped out before he could stop it. He shook his head and said, in true Luke Donovan fashion, "No, you just saved an entire team with simple kindness. The kind of thing even the smartest people tend to forget." Ellie squinted at him, gave another little shrug. "Guess I should ask for overtime then." Luke shook his head, but in those eyes that had stayed cold for so long, there was something new. A flicker of light, a hint of amusement, a glimmer of gratitude, and something else, far more dangerous. As the deal wrapped up successfully, the party kicked into full gear. Glasses clinked, laughter echoed, and the room buzzed with celebration. Luke was quickly surrounded by partners and executives, handshakes, congratulations, toasts flying from every direction. Ellie slipped away quietly, retreating to the small bar tucked in the corner. She rewarded herself with a sweet, colorful mocktail, sipping slowly as the room sparkled around her. Not quite part of it, but not quite invisible anymore. Ellie was absent-mindedly stirring her drink when a female voice purred beside her, so sweet it sent a chill up her spine. Well, Luke Donovan sure switched tastes fast. Ellie looked up. Standing in front of her was a stunning woman in a body-hugging black dress, makeup flawless, posture sharpened to perfection. She smiled, but her eyes were pure thorns. "Sorry, and you are?" Ellie asked politely. "Oh, I'm sure you haven't heard of me," the woman said with a smirk. "I'm Vanessa, Luke's ex. We used to be very close, very, very close." She dragged out those last words, dripping with venom, just loud enough for nearby guests to start glancing over. A small crowd of curious onlookers began whispering, their eyes drifting toward Ellie. Ellie gave a small nod, completely unfazed. She took a calm sip of her drink, then smiled, not wide, just enough to keep her cool. But Vanessa wasn't done. Her gaze swept over Ellie's simple red dress, the smirk on her lips sharpening like glass. "Interesting," Vanessa said, her voice dripping honey. "Luke used to go for women with a bit more class, and now—" She looked Ellie up and down, then let out a soft, cutting laugh. "Well, that's quite a shift in taste." A few soft chuckles followed, quiet but sharp, like knives slipped between ribs. Ellie set her glass down on the bar and turned fully toward Vanessa. There was no anger in her eyes, just a faint, icy light. The kind of look that doesn't raise its voice, but makes you feel like someone just pressed their fingers to your throat. Ellie tilted her head, flashing the sweetest smile she could muster. "Oh, thanks for the reminder. I was just wondering what category I fall into." She paused for exactly one beat, then added, voice light and clear, "Maybe something like a light dessert, easy to enjoy, doesn't leave a bitter aftertaste." The air around them froze. Someone nearby choked slightly on their drink. Vanessa's face went pale for just a second. But Ellie wasn't finished. Her smile widened, sugar-sweet and sharp as glass. "But hey, I really admire you. Not everyone's brave enough to stand in the middle of a crowded party and announce they're an expired item." A loud "ft" burst out from a nearby table. A man couldn't hold back his laugh and had to turn away to hide it. Vanessa froze. Her face flushed deep red with rage, but no comeback came to her lips that wouldn't make things even worse. She stood there, silent and humiliated. Ellie simply shrugged, turned on her heel, and walked away, leaving Vanessa frozen in place like a statue. From across the room, Luke had seen the entire exchange. He slowly made his way toward Ellie, catching her gaze just as she looked up at him. No words passed between them. He didn't need to say a thing. Her eyes said it all. She didn't need him to protect her. He handed her a fresh glass of water, a quiet, unspoken gesture of solidarity. "Who was that?" Ellie asked. No whisper, no hesitation. "The past," Luke replied. Just as simply, no further explanation needed. Ellie let out a soft laugh. She raised her glass and tapped it lightly against his. "Good thing I live in the present." Luke looked at her, and something stirred inside him, something unfamiliar and disarming. For the first time, he wasn't seeing someone trying to cling to him. He was seeing someone who could stand beside him. Around them, the party buzzed on. Laughter, music, clinking glasses filling the air. But under the warm, golden lights, in that crowded room, it was Ellie who shone the brightest in Luke's eyes. No designer dress, no flashy title, no effort to be anyone but herself. And that was enough. An hour later, the party hit its peak. Conversations grew louder, the energy higher, glasses raised in celebration all around. Ellie strolled leisurely through the room, soaking in the atmosphere with a quiet ease, always just slightly apart, present but never lost in the crowd. Her simple red dress still stood out, a flicker of fire in a sea of glitter and gold, but not everyone appreciated her presence. Near a side stage, Vanessa had regrouped, still fuming, but now flanked by a few hangers-on. Old colleagues of Luke's, the type who knew how to smile to your face and aim for your back the second you turned. This time, Vanessa wasn't going in alone. She had backup and venom sharpened by humiliation. Ellie, unaware, happened to pass by at just the wrong moment. "Oh look," Vanessa chimed in, her voice honeyed with poison. "The negotiation hero herself. I heard you saved a multi-million-dollar deal with dessert?" Snickers echoed through the group, dry, mocking, cruel. Ellie stopped and turned, her eyes sparkling, not with anger but with actual amusement, as if the joke had landed, just not how they thought. "Yeah, lucky me," she said coolly. "Turns out not everyone in a nice suit actually knows how to use their brain." A clean hit, quiet, precise, and just like that, the snickering died. But Vanessa wasn't done. She stepped closer, her smile tight, voice dipped in fake sweetness with a blade hidden beneath every word. "What a shame. With talent like that, you should really think about opening a bakery, instead of dreaming about places you don't belong." Around them, the room shifted. Conversations dimmed. Curious eyes turned their way. Bored investors, gossip-hungry socialites, people aching for something real to break through the gloss. Ellie didn't flinch. She calmly lifted her cocktail, gave it a slow swirl, letting the ice clink gently against the glass. Then she smiled, soft, almost kind. "Oh, you've got it wrong," Ellie said, voice sweet as honey. "I'm not climbing anywhere. I just happen to be standing here." She leaned in, just a fraction, eyes steady. If someone feels like their spot is threatened, maybe they should ask themselves how solid was that ground to begin with. The entire room fell silent. Then, a beat later, laughter erupted. Not the polite, veiled kind, but real, unstoppable laughter. A few people clapped softly. One or two even whistled. Vanessa stood frozen, her face burning with humiliation, unable to say a word. From across the room, Luke watched, his wine glass suspended midair, eyes lit with something rare, pure enjoyment. He didn't need to step in. Ellie hadn't just held her ground, she made the whole room see her differently. Respectfully. Unforgettably. Ellie turned and walked away without a glance back. Calm, composed, as if none of it had even scratched her. As she passed by Luke, she leaned in just enough and whispered, only for him, "You know, your foundation's a little shaky too." Luke burst out laughing, for the first time all night. A real laugh. Unfiltered. Free. He caught up to her, matching her pace as they slipped out of the noisy crowd, leaving behind the whispers, the stolen glances, and a room now buzzing with a strange mix of surprise and admiration. They stopped at a small outdoor balcony, where the night air was crisp and clean, the city lights twinkling below. "You're better than I gave you credit for," Luke said, his voice low and steady. Ellie crossed her arms, leaning casually against the railing, eyes glinting in the dark. "I don't think I'm better," she said. "I just don't like people who think they get to decide who deserves to stand where." Luke looked at her under the soft golden light. Ellie's face wasn't flawless by glamorous standards. Her cheeks were flushed from the breeze, her eyes bright with defiance. But to him, in that moment, she was impossible to look away from. A quiet thought passed through his mind, clear and sudden. Maybe I've been searching for the wrong kind of person all along. "Ellie," he said softly. She tilted her head, meeting his gaze. Luke wanted to say something honest, more real than anything he'd ever said before. But in the end, he simply held out his hand, palm open. No rehearsed charm, no practiced elegance, just a silent invitation, "Stand with me. Right here." Ellie looked at his hand. A small smile curved her lips. Not smug, not rushed, just right on time. She placed her hand in his. For the first time that long evening, Luke Donovan no longer cared about the eyes that might be watching. The night breeze drifted across the balcony, carrying the faint scent of flowers and the distant hum of music from the ballroom. Luke stood beside Ellie, her hand still resting easily in his. A calm silence stretched between them, unhurried, unbroken. Ellie gazed up at the star-filled sky, a playful smile tugging at her lips. "You know," she said, her voice as soft as the wind, "I didn't think I'd end my night like this, standing next to a millionaire on a balcony instead of folding someone's laundry." Luke tilted his head, a rare glint of amusement dancing in his eyes. "And are you disappointed?" he asked, his voice low and warm. Ellie turned to look him straight in the eyes. For a moment, time seemed to pause, just a heartbeat slower. She teased, pretending to think, then let out a soft laugh. "Kind of disappointed, actually. No overtime bonus yet." Luke laughed. Deep, rough, the kind of laugh that wrapped around them like a warm echo. He gave her hand a gentle squeeze, pulling her just a little closer. "Then," he said softly, his voice melting into the night air, "what if tonight? I'm not just asking you to dinner, but inviting you into a world that includes me. Would you say yes?" Ellie raised an eyebrow, trying to look thoughtful, but the blush on her cheeks gave her away. "Do I need to sign a contract?" she asked, half joking, half not. Luke shook his head, his smile tender. "Just one condition. Don't disappear from my life after tonight." Ellie felt her heart skip a beat. For the first time, behind the cool arrogance and guarded distance, she saw a different Luke Donovan. Sincere, uncertain, and genuinely afraid of losing something real. She blinked, her voice barely above a whisper. "You know I'm not great at sticking to contracts." Luke leaned in slightly, just enough for his breath to brush her skin, warm and steady. "Then let me be the one held accountable," he murmured. A wave of warmth surged through her, too big to name, too real to ignore. She instinctively turned her face away, flustered, but Luke didn't let her slip. He gently touched her chin, coaxing her gaze back to his. "Ellie?" He said her name again, slowly, like he was savoring every syllable. "Do you know you're the one thing that was never in any of my plans, and the only thing I can't stand to lose?" Ellie's heart thundered in her chest, every cell in her body lighting up like it had been waiting to hear those words. She let out a shaky laugh. "Are you flirting with me, Mr. Donovan?" Luke shrugged, flashing that signature half-smile, the kind that could undo walls in seconds. "No. I'm proposing a long-term contract, with one main clause: I belong to you." Ellie laughed, shaking her head, her hand still resting easily in his. No hesitation, no retreat. Tempting, but I have one condition. Name it. You have to be able to put up with me, even when I spill wine on your floor or say something ridiculous that embarrasses you in front of everyone. Luke tilted his head, his gaze warm and unwavering. Ellie Carter, you've spilled wine, embarrassed me, made me laugh in places where I'm supposed to be stone-faced. And you're still here, radiant like a beautiful disaster I have no desire to avoid. Ellie burst into laughter, joy bursting open in her chest like fireworks. Well then, Mr. Donovan, she giggled. Congrats on signing the most important life contract you'll ever make. Luke pulled her closer, eyes locked onto hers, as if the rest of the world had quietly disappeared. And when he leaned in, lips just grazing her forehead, Ellie closed her eyes, heart pounding wildly, knowing, for the first time in her life, that even a quirky housemaid could completely capture the heart of a cold-hearted millionaire. The air on the balcony settled into a soft, glowing hush. Beneath the gentle golden lights, Ellie looked up at Luke, her eyes carrying something tender, something she usually kept hidden from the world. Luke still held her hand, firm but never forceful. His gaze rested on her like she was the only thing that existed, the only thing that mattered, in this entire moment. Ellie, he said, his voice low and steady, I'm not great with words, and I'm definitely not the kind of guy who does the whole movie scene emotional speech thing. Ellie let out a soft laugh, cutting him off with a sparkle in her eye. Good. I'd worry if you started reciting poetry under the moonlight. Luke let out a quiet laugh, and something in his eyes softened, the edges of his usual sharpness blurring into warmth. Then let me put it simply, he murmured, leaning in until his forehead gently touched hers, voice low, each word deliberate. I want you, not just for tonight, for the days ahead, for the mornings you mess up the coffee and the nights you argue with me until we're both too tired to care. Ellie's breath hitched. She opened her eyes to look at him, her heart tripping over itself. Luke pulled back just enough for her to see the sincerity in his gaze. Nothing hidden, nothing held back. I'm not choosing you because you fit what someone else expects, he said quietly. I'm choosing you because when I'm with you, it's the first time I don't feel like I have to be anyone but myself. A soft breeze swept through, tossing Ellie's hair playfully across her forehead. She laughed, voice light and a little breathless. You know, if you keep dropping lines like that, I might start thinking you're the real deal. Luke's grip on her hand tightened just slightly, his voice low but certain. I am the real deal. And if you're willing to keep me, I'll gladly stay on display for the rest of my life. Ellie burst out laughing, tossing her head back, the sound ringing clear and bright like crystal glasses clinking. When the laughter faded, their eyes found each other again, locked in quiet understanding. No words needed, just a shared glance, a silly grin, a simple squeeze of hands. And in that stillness, one thing became clear. They had found each other, in the most unexpected, honest, and absolutely right way. In the distance, the final notes of the evening's music played, signaling the end of the party. But out on that small balcony, a completely different story had just begun. From an impulsive invitation, a simple red dress, and a chance slice of cheesecake, an unexpected love story took root, one that didn't follow any script. Luke Donovan, the man who once believed everything in life could be controlled, had finally been undone by something he never saw coming. The natural, honest, and delightfully unpredictable spirit of Ellie Carter, the quirky housemaid who shook his world in all the ways logic never could. Love doesn't need to be calculated, measured, or dressed up in perfect standards. Sometimes the most beautiful things come from the people we least expect. All it takes is the courage to open your heart, to trust what you feel, and magic might just find you. Unexpected, unpolished, and absolutely real. Like a seemingly ordinary night that turns into something unforgettable. What about you? Would you take a chance on someone completely outside your usual type? Drop a comment below. We'd love to hear your story. If you enjoy sweet, funny, and surprising love stories like this one, don't forget to hit subscribe so you never miss a new episode. And tap the notification bell so we can keep sharing the next chapters of love together. See you in the next story.